News Odyssey commentator Frederica Mathewes-Green looks at hazing as both practice and ritual.
One week we were viewing the horrible ritual of blood pinning among Marine paratroopers. The next we were hearing the details of hazing at the Citadel. One female student said she was subjected to comments about her body and ordered to sing "You've Lost That Lovin' Feeling" to an upperclassman's girlfriend. Now, I grew up near the Citadel. I dated cadets. My father was a graduate. And believe me, this is the faintest imitation of what those guys do to each other. Singing "You've Lost That Lovin' Feeling" is not like blood pinning. But what these incidents have in common is the initiation rite, an ordeal by which a person is tried and proved worthy. It aims to create loyalty, a willingness to die for others. Initiation is a universal phenomenon, from ancient tribes to city gangs, to the mafia, to the military. But initiation doesn't have to be cruel to accomplish its aim, just challenging. Bloody violence is not required. I'd hate to think that the Norman Schwarzkopf of tomorrow is being formed somewhere today by brutality. But I wouldn't mind imagining him singing "You've Lost That Lovin' Feeling." I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
Frederica, thanks for being with us. We want to know what you think. Drop us a line at the address on your screen or leave a note in the guest book at our website. Latest in a series of controversies about religious displays in public places. Should they stay or go? News Odyssey commentator Frederica Mathewes-Green shares her views.
Back up the U-Haul, Nellie. It's time to rotate the symbols. In the last few weeks, we've heard several news items about religious symbols on the move. The ACLU wants the Ten Commandments out of an Alabama courtroom. Governor Fob James says they stay. Muslims want a depiction of Muhammad out of a marble frieze at the Supreme Court. Chief Justice Rehnquist says he stays. Feminists want a statue of Susan B. Anthony and other suffragists in the Capitol Rotunda. And they want Roger Williams' statue moved out to make room. Baptists say he stays. The truth is that all these symbols could stand a move. After too long in one place, they become mere dust collectors, overly familiar, with their messages unheard. Freshen things up, make everybody happy. Chisel a hat on Muhammad and relabel him Roger Williams. Send the suffragists to Alabama. And the Ten Commandments. Where might it do people good to take a fresh look at those? Don't get me started. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
Frederica Mathewes-Green has recently written a book about the mysteries of orthodoxy. She's here now to share a part of that journey with us.
Well, it's getting to be just about time for Easter. Around my house, we're getting ready to dye eggs. We've planned the Easter feast, and I've gotten the baskets out of the basement. No, I didn't forget to set my watch back. I'm an Eastern Orthodox Christian, and when it comes to Easter, we just use different criteria for choosing the date than Western churches do. A lot of people aren't too familiar with Eastern Orthodoxy. My Catholic friends say, "Aren't you Protestant?" And my Protestant friends presume I'm some fancy kind of Catholic. But we're a third church entirely, one with ancient roots, beginning in Jerusalem, then spreading mostly eastward, through Constantinople, then Russia, and finally leaping the Bering Strait to come to this continent through Alaska. There are about 250 million Orthodox in the world, making us the second largest Christian faith. But don't be too surprised if you're not familiar with us yet. If you'd like to know more, you're welcome to visit this Sunday when we have Palm Sunday, or during the following days for Holy Week, and then Easter services. We call it Pascha. There's a lot I love about being Orthodox, but I tell you, there's one thing that gives me a special kick every year. I get to buy my Easter candy half price. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
Author and commentator Frederica Mathewes-Green joins us now with some thoughts on morals and the military.
Recently, the American military has treated us to a dress parade, maybe an undress parade, of sexual misconduct charges. Some have been as ugly as coercion and rape. Some have been milder instances of romance, but still forbidden because they cross the boundaries of rank. Some of these stories involved old-fashioned adultery. All along this range of misbehavior, people found themselves facing legal charges, trials, and even terms in military prison. In much of this, the military is reflecting general cultural values. Adultery, to take one example, still meets with widespread disapproval. But that's not the same as saying it's unpopular. It's a prime draw in entertainment media and too widely practiced, no matter how much it's frowned upon. There seems to be only so much that social disapproval can do. Churches can do little to stem the tide, and education and medical warnings have limited effect as well. But the military is not one to settle for mere persuasion. The only institution in the country that will actually put you in court or in jail for sexual misbehavior is the military. I guess there's a lesson here. If you really expect to be successful at stamping out this kind of mischief, it helps to be backed by armored tanks. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
Break. One parent, commentator Frederica Mathewes-Green, is already thinking about fall.
As we wind up one school year, I'm looking toward the next and planning the budget and clothes and travel accordingly. Come fall, my 3 kids will be going to 3 different schools. The oldest will be returning to a college nearby for her junior year. The middle one, the homeschooler, did so well on his SATs, he's going to skip senior high school year and go straight to a great books college down south. The youngest will be entering a private high school for 10th grade. These are all good schools, and they're all Christian schools, but surprisingly, they're of 3 different brands. My daughter's college is Catholic. The older son's college is Orthodox, and the high school is Presbyterian. Just as James Davison Hunter predicted in his book, Culture Wars, denomination doesn't matter so much anymore. What matters is where you stand on the spectrum of social change, which he divided along 2 lines, progressive or small o orthodox. Our family wants schooling that reflects our values, and the best schools available happen to be of widely different flavors. But we can deal with that. If a child comes home with a faulty understanding of a sacrament, we can talk it through. But if he or she comes home with fractured morals, the damage is much harder to repair. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
Mathewes-Green has an eye on Mars and a finger on Genesis.
The last time Mars was in the headlines, that planet had tossed us a meteorite which showed hazy signs of bacterial life. The evidence was not conclusive, however, and Earthlings were left without the assurance that the red planet is populated by little green men. We don't know if it's even little green mold. But at that time, some suggested that the very possibility of life on Mars shook the traditional view of God. Apparently, they believed it to be a core Christian dogma that Earth is the only inhabited planet. No, God is able to create and populate other planets and work out salvation with those inhabitants just as he did here. C.S. Lewis wrote a trilogy of novels on this topic, one of which, Paralandra, imagines the story of the temptation in the garden being played out again, this time on the planet Venus. The latest news from Pathfinder, however, brings this novel idea forward one giant step. Apparently, Mars was once host to a giant flood, churning water hundreds of miles wide and perhaps thousands of feet deep. Does this sound familiar? Have we run into a repeat of another familiar Bible story? Did some little green Noah once build an ark and put into it 2 by 2 gargles and ribnets and fuzzy little zebes? If so, where are they now? I'll give you a hint. Ever heard of Roswell? I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
Just commitment and society's response to it.
An opening scene of the movie Back to the Future shows a carload of villains shooting an old man when their plot to steal plutonium goes awry. Hip to the latest trend in prejudice, the film identified the bad guys as Arabs, the newest group that red-blooded Americans love to hate. And the thing our culture fears most is Muslim Arabs' commitment to their religion, Islam. Not their religion, their commitment to it. Americans don't mind people worshiping whomever or whatever they want. They just don't like people to get too intense about it. We favor a placid, good citizen type of religious commitment that treats faith as a productive hobby, not something you give your life to. People who take their religion too seriously get branded fundamentalist, no matter what their faith. This is our fundamentalism, that all religions are equal, all values are valid, and the most important thing is for everybody to get along. But not everybody agrees with this. Some believe that a specific God has revealed specific laws for worship and moral behavior, and further that this is the only true God, the one everybody should be worshiping. Can we learn to tolerate people who embrace their faith with this sort of fervor? If not, how shallow is our tolerance, after all? I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
The tragic death of Diana, Princess of Wales, has dominated the news this week. We close our program with some thoughts on the princess by author and commentator Frederica Mathewes-Green.
On a summer morning a lifetime ago, Americans flipped on their TVs to watch the fabulous wedding of the Prince and Princess of Wales. Coincidentally, the psalm appointed to be read that day in the regular Anglican cycle was Psalm 45, which describes the wedding of a king. The princess is decked in her chamber with gold-woven robes, we read. With joy and gladness they are led along as they enter the palace of the king. There was little joy or gladness in Princess Diana's brief life in the palace of the king. The timid delight she showed on her wedding day soon changed to timid sorrow, and her habitual expression came to feature a bitterly set jaw. It was this combination of vulnerability and determination that fascinated her admirers so. People just wanted to console this poor little rich girl, and she just wanted to be left alone. When she attempted to find her own consolation in love affairs, it provided more fodder for gossip. The princess's death is being blamed on the tabloid photographers who pursued her, but they were only the servants of a public that clamored for ever more intimate details of her life. This brief story is now at an end. At her funeral this weekend, prayers from around the world will be joined that she will at last find peace in the palace of the king. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
Show its strength in numbers during its Stand in the Gap rally in Washington this weekend. But Frederica Mathewes-Green says it's time to take a stand for men.
When I went off to college some 25 years ago, one of the first things I learned was that men are no good. It wasn't an insight based on experience. The men I knew, the ones in my classes, the ones I was related to, were okay, even likable. They were flawed at about the same rate as the women I knew. So it came as a surprise to learn that some vague, faceless conspiracy of men was oppressing me. This wasn't really an unpleasant discovery. It makes tidy sense of the world to picture yourself a victim and others as the cause of all your problems. Oddly enough, the good-hearted men around me seemed eager to agree with this analysis, and they marched by my side as I protested various oppressions. A couple of decades later, I can see that this was disastrous. Men's self-respect was systematically undermined, like that of a beaten dog or a belittled child. But women did not rise as men fell. We're more endangered and impoverished than ever before because men no longer feel able or even allowed to care for us. When men lose their sense of worth, women end up hurt. We're all in this boat together. If there's one criticism I'd have of the Promise Keepers movement, it's that it's too apologetic. Men have been courageously and nobly self-sacrificing, giving their lives for women and children for untold generations. It's time they had our thanks and our support. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
A year, according to market research, but it's also becoming one of the most controversial. Author and commentator Frederica Mathewes-Green says it's time to lighten up.
Halloween is back and scaring school administrators more than anyone else. In my hometown of Baltimore, some schools have forbidden the celebration in the belief that Halloween glorifies witches. Witchcraft is forbidden in the Bible, they say, and can lead to spiritual catastrophe. On the other hand, at a preschool attended by a little friend, administrators reached the opposite conclusion. They canceled the Halloween celebration because they felt the image of witches it presents is too negative. Warty, cackling hags undermine the dignity of that ancient religion of witchcraft, as it's imagined by some contemporary feminists. Obviously, the Witches Alliance needs a better PR department. It may be true there's no such thing as bad publicity, but when schools on both sides of the issue wind up canceling the celebration, it looks to me like you're the loser. An image makeover is what's called for. I'd recommend a series of focus group studies on questions like the pointed hat, how high? The black cat has got to go, but a golden retriever might work. You're going to need an appealing national spokesperson who can look good getting teary-eyed on Oprah. It can be done, but it doesn't come cheap, so don't eat all your Tootsie Rolls at once. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
But there is nothing new about arranged marriages. Author and commentator Frederica Mathewes-Green offers her thoughts.
By the time they're in grammar school, kids are already curious about who they're going to wind up marrying. There are a whole arsenal of research tools to aid in this prediction. There's the old standard of twisting an apple stem until it comes loose, signaling the first letter of your beloved's name. There are formulas for inducing dreams or turning names into numerical calculations or foretelling the true love's appearance. Did you know that if your big toe is shorter and fatter than the one next to it, your spouse will be shorter and fatter than you are? This can be a horrifying thought if you're the shortest girl in second grade. The wedding extravaganza in Washington, D.C. last weekend had a lot of tantalizing elements, but perhaps the most provocative was the idea that 2,500 brides and grooms had exercised less control over their choice of spouse than if they'd been twisting an apple stem. The Unification Church had matched them, and many newlyweds had never seen their life mates before the event. Strange as it seems, it's got an advantage over many a conventional wedding. Mere romance is a flimsy foundation, and as any pastor knows, young couples can falter when they've made mutual affection their only resource. On the other hand, even in the absence of dizzying love, shared values and a commitment to marriage itself can make a family with a good chance of enduring. After all, most of us have arranged marriages somewhere back in our family tree. They resulted in products as fine as us. There must be something good about them. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
Groups, some of them Christian, a fact that causes author and commentator Frederica Mathewes-Green to raise some serious concern.
Militia members are quite correct. Christians can expect to be persecuted. Jesus promised us as much. If they loved me, they will love you, he said, and since they crucified him, we can expect to face some scary times. We may even see the outbreak of violence. But the confusion seems to be about which side of the gun we're supposed to be on. Contrary to common assumption, Jesus never encouraged people to fight for their liberty. He had plenty of opportunity to make that point if he'd wanted to. He lived in Israel while it was under the rule of Rome, and those Romans were genuine dictionary definition oppressors, worse than anything we've seen lately. They taxed the local citizens and sent the money to a foreign government. Guess what? Jesus told his followers to pay those taxes. He didn't tell them to hold a Bethlehem Tea Party. While law permitted a soldier to make a citizen carry his pack a mile, Jesus told his followers to carry it a second mile as well. Hard as it is to believe, he didn't add, and then shoot him. Jesus didn't exalt personal liberty any more than he did self-esteem. Popular ideas like these can seem so familiar and appealing that we presume they must have biblical approval. But an actual reading of the book will show scant evidence. St. Paul would agree. He told a slave owner to free his slave. He didn't tell the slave to kill his master. Jesus warned that we might have to die for our faith, but he never told us to kill for it. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
These days, most of those executed, about one a week in the U.S., die almost unnoticed. Author and commentator Frederica Mathewes-Green offers her thoughts.
Carla Faye Tucker presented a nightmare case for advocates of the death penalty. Presuming that her conversion was genuine, what was the point of executing her? If she was fully rehabilitated, why not let her live? This question gets to the root of the purpose of criminal penalties. Is the goal the rehabilitation of the criminal, or is it punishment? When the state has conferred the death penalty, it has decided it has no further interest in rehabilitation. If a person finds God, good for them. The state has concluded that punishment is now its only goal. Nevertheless, God always has an interest in rehabilitation. For this reason, the death penalty is a bad idea, whether the criminal is born again or not. The state's just interest in punishment can be met by requiring life at hard labor with the simplest food and lodging. Let criminals know true punishment every day till natural death. But God alone gives life and should alone decide when to end it. The state should not stoop to the shedding of blood or cut short the time God allows for the individual to repent. In the news at the same time as the Tucker case was the trial of a female naval cadet who murdered her romantic rival and who shows no such attractive rehabilitation. Will those who protested Tucker's execution be as vocal in seeking mercy for this apparently unrepentant young lady? It looks to me like she's the one who really needs more time. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
Why some people are applauding the preacher in the movie The Apostle. Author and commentator Frederica Mathewes-Green joins the ovations, but only to a point.
Robert Duvall's new movie, The Apostle, has been drawing lots of unexpected praise. What's unusual is that its portrait of a Southern preacher is sympathetic, not cynical. Usually when a movie features a guy in a white suit with a molasses accent who's shouting about the Bible, the audience is being set up to reflexively feel for their wallets. The message is, anybody who loves Jesus and comes from Texas can't be all good. But Duvall's portrayal of the apostle shows a flawed character who makes a big mistake, goes through a time of humbling, and works hard for a redemptive victory. Even hard-boiled critics find him oddly appealing. This has led some Christian leaders to give 3 cheers.
They see the film as a breakthrough, the first time in decades that a major Hollywood film has presented Christians positively. I'll go for 2 cheers. The Apostle is appealing to critics, but partly because he is so safely alien. None of the intelligentsia who praise this movie are actually going to go out and join a church like the one this preacher leads. And that suburban church down the road from their house, maybe that's still a little threatening, a little too close to home. Hooray for Duvall for presenting this compelling character, and hooray for the image of racial reconciliation it provides. I'm saving my 3rd cheer for a movie about a church more like the one around the corner. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
First passed a year ago. The issue continues to be a divisive one all over the country. Author and commentator Frederica Mathewes-Green says the debate is far from over.
The first publicly disclosed death by legal suicide feels like an event that has been a long time coming. It's been over 3 years since Oregon passed the so-called death with dignity law, but the country as a whole has been pondering the question far longer than that. It's the word dignity that concerns me. There's nothing wrong with people refusing further treatment if they want to let nature take its course. And there's no reason why anyone can't be given sufficient medication to control pain. But when the demand is for something more than that, when the demand is that we be guaranteed dignity, when the assumption is that being dignified is more important than being alive, I start to worry. Who loses in such a formulation is anyone who's perceived as undignified. People who are disabled, perhaps, or old, or weak. Under the soothing rhetoric, what's being suggested is that life is for the healthy, handsome, and strong, and that those who don't fit that definition should be ashamed of themselves and consider their lives not worth living. Thus, we'll seek out and destroy disabled children before they're born and nudge the elderly to cut short their untidy lives. We'll advance toward that sparkling eugenic society where only the perfect are allowed to live. I can't help but wonder if we defeated Hitler after all. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
Igniting a public debate over morality. But are people being too judgmental? Author and commentator Frederica Mathewes-Green offers her thoughts on why people are watching.
It used to be that the common term for describing conventional middle-class morality was hypocritical. And the charge was that people would give lip service to living straight-laced lives and criticize those who strayed, but in their private lives, they applied a looser standard. I'm not sure just when that got turned inside out, but one sign that it has is the way people reacted to Clinton's alleged womanizing. Instead of hypocritically criticizing him while doing the same thing secretly, Americans refused to criticize him while shunning similar behavior. The old situation was exactly reversed. 2 things caused this. One, thanks to popular entertainment, we've been exposed to a wider array of sexual hijinks than we've personally experienced, wider than most of us want to experience. Second, we've absorbed the message that we're not allowed to criticize anyone else's behavior. Most of us live conventional lives, but believe we shouldn't judge those who don't. But of course, deep inside, people do make judgments. They're just ashamed to admit it to a pollster. I think this explains the popularity of the Jerry Springer show. Right there in your living room, you can see absolute idiots who have made a mess of their lives parade across your screen. You can hoot and point and make fun of them. That's why they're there. When questioned in a public poll, we have to put on the long face of tolerance. But in the privacy of our own homes, when the shades are drawn, the Springer show gives people a chance to be judgmental and a chance to be naughty. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
One of the opening scenes of the new movie, The Truman Show, main character Truman Burbank sees the light. The light he sees is a standard theatrical lighting device that has just crashed to the street in front of him, falling, it would seem, out of a clear blue sky. Soon other clues begin accumulating, and Truman starts to suspect that there is a hidden reality behind the world of everyday appearance. It seems that some background intelligence links and arranges all the seemingly random details of his life. Someone is watching from the other side of that clear blue sky. Among other things, this fascinating film expresses the human ambivalence about God. On the one hand, we want to believe that someone is watching over us, loving and protecting. On the other hand, we rebel against control and demand free will. In exploring that conflict, The Truman Show offers a response to the old question, how can a good God permit evil? As we see, it's only in the minutely scripted world of Sea Haven that life can be ceaselessly happy and sunny. When free will enters the picture, we step into an abyss where anything can happen. Some people realize that bending their free will to the underlying will of God is the way to create a meaningful life in uncertainty. But realizing this entails seeing an entirely different kind of light. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
A former Episcopalian turned Orthodox says it's time for the Anglicans to rethink their interpretation of God's teachings.
Every 10 years, the worldwide Anglican Communion meets in England for the Lambeth Conference. Another Lambeth is now at hand, and like a high school reunion, there'll be plenty of talking over old times and pondering the future. The Anglican Communion, called the Episcopal Church in America, has been having some colorful times lately. The Washington Post ran a front-page story about Manhattan churches that allow members to bring their dogs to worship. An American bishop just released a book that describes the idea of salvation by the cross as barbarian and primitive. Oh, and you can't say prayers that actually ask God to do anything. This bishop's God is way too foggy for that. Worldwide, there's a continuing battle between wealthy first world Anglicans who want to throw out traditional sexual morality and believers in less elite nations who stand by the faith once delivered. This was once the most aesthetic and austere of Western denominations, yet it seems to be sinking to levels of self-parody that outdo joke writers' imaginations. What will the Lord, the Lion of Judah, say about this trampling of his dignity and rejection of his teachings? We'll find out on that day when the lion lies down with the Lambeth. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
4 News Odyssey commentators join us now to discuss the current White House crisis. Barbara Reynolds and Frederica Mathewes-Green join us from Washington, D.C. Earl Jackson is in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and Will Campbell joins us here in our Nashville studio. Let's begin with forgiveness, group. Every religious tradition really embraces it. Is it a central question in this, Barbara Reynolds?
I think we should forgive, but the president still has to be accountable for his acts. He has betrayed his family, he has betrayed his friends, he has betrayed the nation, and I think that he is the ultimate role model of this country, and I think that his crimes are inexcusable, and they hurt us all if we pretend like we do not have a dysfunctional president and become a nation of enablers. He should have to pay either through censorship or resignation or impeachment, even as we forgive.
Will, is inexcusable unforgivable?
Well, I don't think there are any conditions that we can set about forgiveness. I was with a group the other day, and 2 people, they had these little bracelets on, WWJD, what would Jesus do? And they were condemning the president. I asked, well, what about this, you know? Well, he has to do this, he has to. That wasn't what Jesus said when a similar thing came up, and, you know, they had all the TV cameras out there, they called them stones. And Jesus wrote in the sand, and then he looked up, and all of a sudden he said, where'd everybody go? Where's Kenneth Starr? Where'd the grand jury go? She said, oh, I don't know, they're gone. And he said, well, who condemned you? And she said, I don't know. I reckon nobody. He said, well, I don't either. No conditions, nothing, that she had to do. Now, there was a mild rebuke following that. Said, okay, now, go, but don't do that anymore. That's not very nice.
Frederica Mathewes-Green?
I think the question of forgiveness is separate from the question of what is good for the country. But definitely, healing will not occur until forgiveness is given. Healing also will not occur until genuine repentance is present. President Clinton has to be in a place where he can profoundly accept forgiveness by admitting his sin.
And Earl Jackson?
Well, we need to distinguish 3 things. One is repentance, the other is forgiveness, and the third is accountability. As individuals, we should forgive, no matter how we've been offended. Jesus teaches us that. But the president has got to be accountable for his actions as president of the United States, and forgiveness does not absolve him. And real repentance is heartfelt contrition, and I don't think the president has experienced that, and I don't think he's conveyed that.
I'm wondering if there's a sort of hypocritical moralism at work here when so many American marriages are suffering from infidelity and ending in divorce. Can we hold the president to this higher standard fairly?
Can I respond to that?
The problem with that question, if I may, and I've heard that question again and again, and the problem is that it seems to suggest that because some people aren't living up to the standards, or even most people aren't living up to the standards, that we ought to just ignore the standards. But I think the only hope we have for preserving the American family and our way of life is continuing to hammer away that there are standards, and it doesn't matter who violates them, they have still been violated, and they still must be held accountable.
Frederica?
And I'd like to say, just last night, I checked in the landmark survey, Sex in America, came out a couple of years ago. You may remember it. And the shocking finding was that people were not committing adultery at anything like the rate that was presumed. In fact, the figure was 80% of married people do not commit adultery during any of the years that they are married. So this is not something everybody is doing. We are not asking the president to meet a standard no one else is meeting. Even those who commit adultery are not having sex with underlings in their offices. That's really beyond the pale.
Will, in a commentary on this program, you talked about one commandment, the one against adultery. We also now have the president admitting he lied. Is that a bigger issue to you?
Well, I don't know if it's bigger, it's related, but I don't mean to appear to be defending Mr. Clinton. I broke with Mr. Clinton before he became president. He's governor of Arkansas, and he had a young fellow there accused of being a murderer, and he was. He was guilty, said he was, but he was so retarded that he asked how long it would take before they would get through, and it's about 20 minutes. And he said, well, I'm going to save my pecan pie, my dessert, until you get through with this execution. We didn't have to kill that guy, you know. So I don't mean to be defending Mr. Clinton, but I'm concerned with a couple of things, and we can go into that. It's not my time to preach here.
But I'm concerned because the chickens do come home to roost. You have, I believe, in corporate guilt, just like in the 60s when people were into drugs, and then the 80s, young people started to be in drugs, and then the parents said, well, where did they get that from, while they took another drink of their cocktails. So I'm saying if it is put out that it is okay to commit adultery, and it's okay for powerful men to seduce their employees, certainly we're going to pay for it in the next decade, because this behavior will be repeated.
We need to be clear, too. There are two words that nobody seems to want to mention. This is not just a matter of an indiscretion. It's not just a matter of infidelity. Those are bad enough.
Okay, Earl.
There are two words, sexual predator. Sexual predator. And I think that's what we've got in the White House.
When we come back, pollsters get a workout capturing opinions about the Clinton scandal. Of Americans still support President Clinton, according to polling figures released within the past week by Gallup, USA Today, and CNN. When asked, should President Clinton be impeached and removed from office, 67% said he should not be impeached, while 30% said he should. When asked whether they approve of the way the president is handling his job, 60% say yes, 35% disapprove. And in response to the question, should the president resign or remain in office until the end of his term, 72% say they believe President Clinton should remain in office, while 25% say he should resign. We turn again to our News Odyssey commentators. Is there any good that can come out of this controversy? Frederica?
I hope what can come out of it is some good self-reflection. One of the strangest juxtapositions of this summer was the Clinton scandal unfolding at the same time we were seeing the movie Saving Private Ryan. To see that kind of self-sacrifice under terrible circumstances, the courage those men had when they had no food, no shelter, and people were shooting at them, compared to the comfort the president lives in and the way he lives his life. I hope that's a story, a lesson that we learn.
Barbara Reynolds?
I think that there can be a cleansing if we can see that even presidents, if they do not have self-control, can fall. This is a message that I teach to my teenage son, that no matter how high you are, if you don't have solid values, you can crumble in your profession or your private house or situation.
Earl Jackson.
We used to pray that our children would grow up to be president. Now we have to pray that they grow up not to be like the president. I think we have a teachable opportunity here for young people across the country who are experiencing high rates of venereal diseases and teen pregnancy to tell them that there are standards, that when those standards are violated, they are self-destructive.
And Will Campbell, I know you don't want to preach, but the last word is yours, sir.
Well, the thing that troubles me deeply about this is, you know, there are 10 commandments, and if anything good can come out of this, it seems to me it will be some real reflection on where we're going as a country. Aside from the morality or immorality, we have to acknowledge that we are more and more imprisoning ourselves in this technological concentration camp, that if one person can do things like getting the DNA from allegedly the most powerful man in America, what can they do to a little fellow like me? So this big brother, plus if anything good can come out of it, is to acknowledge that this preoccupation with sex all the time. Now I read the other day where the writer of Alice in Wonderland was a pedophile, for heaven's sake. Where are we going?
We didn't create the preoccupation. The President of the United States created the preoccupation. We have to address it. You can't pretend
There
it's
are
not a
other things
case.
to be preoccupied
Thank you very much.
with,
I need to cut off the discussion here.
Thanks.
Thanks to all of our News Odyssey commentators. Doesn't get done. News Odyssey commentator Frederica Mathewes-Green says the government is proposing to fill in the gaps with an unusual proposition.
Over in Britain, the government is considering a new twist on church and state relations. The proposal is that the state will hire people to take over the role of pastors in meeting the personal needs of the community. Those who currently serve as registrars of public records, births, deaths, and marriages, will have their duties greatly expanded. They'll connect bickering couples with marriage counselors and send upstanding role models into impoverished neighborhoods. They'll urge new parents who don't go to church to give their children a civil naming ceremony. One government source said that this proposal was meant as a reprimand to churches for doing their job wrong. Churches, he said, are too preachy. The government wants that warm sense of community that church provides, but without all that annoying morality and theology. But there's a difference between doing nice things for people and being a mediator of the awe-filled presence of the holy. The community that springs up around healthy churches grows directly from a common faith, a faith that has specific elements, which people may well, preach about. A healthy church is not just a nice social club, but a place where the holy God, creator of heaven and earth, may be worshipped and adored. To casually strip that out is to lose the very heart of these other good effects. After all, the scripture doesn't say, God so loved the world that he sent a social worker. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
Jolly old St. Nick. Author and news commentator Frederica Mathewes-Green says there's nothing saintly about him.
It's that time of year again when jolly old St. Nicholas reappears, selling everything from tires to perfume. Under his beaming smile, we trudge from mall to mall like drones, fulfilling his command that we buy our way to Christmas cheer. Ironically, this weekend we celebrate the feast day of the real St. Nicholas, the 4th century bishop who is supposedly the source for secular Santa Claus. But the resemblance doesn't go very far. St. Nicholas was known for rescuing abused and unwanted children, giving to the poor, and zealously defending the Christian faith. He didn't sell cola. Compared to the real thing, this Santa Claus, who annually whips kids into a frenzy of whiny acquisitiveness, looks like an evil twin, the anti-Claus. How can concerned parents tell the difference? First, if he's disputing with the heretic Arius about whether the second person of the Trinity was begotten or merely created, that might be the real guy. On the other hand, if he's got elves, nuh-uh. Gaunt and serene with a contemplative gaze, that's the one. A belly that shakes like a bowl full of jelly, probably not. See, it's not really so hard to tell a spiritual giant from a corporate sales symbol. Oh, and one final thing. If you spot any reindeer, just walk away. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
Young people to worship services. In England, a group of advertisers hopes they have found the answer. But author and News Odyssey commentator Frederica Mathewes-Green is not convinced.
How are we ever going to reach those young people? A new series of advertising posters in England shows Jesus made over in the likeness of Che Guevara. Instead of a beret, he's wearing a crown of thorns. The caption reads, "Meek, mild, as if, discover the real Jesus." And one of the ad's developers said he hoped it would end up on teenage girls' walls. Now, there's several problems with this plan. For one thing, the people who found Che's photo dramatically sexy 30 years ago are no longer teens, whether they've noticed this or not. Real teens are going to have no idea who this is. It's obscure 60s nostalgia. For another thing, Che was a supporter of violent revolution, hardly a fit symbol for the one who taught us to love our enemies. And for another thing, he was lousy at it. Che died after leading his group in circles in the jungle without adequate supplies. The only thing to admire about this guy is that he took a darn good picture, and that's not enough grounds to build a theology. Why such desperate pandering? To make Jesus look trendy? We don't get a new makeover on Muhammad every couple of years. Posters don't show the Buddha in the likeness of Mel Gibson. Serene, enlightened, as if. When the Hindus bring out a line of six-armed goddess fighting action figures, we can think about dressing up Jesus as Che. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
Reflection. Author and commentator Frederica Mathewes-Green says for most, this includes making a concerted effort to forgive others.
One evening recently, the members of my parish formed a big circle inside the church. The ends of the circle overlapped, and my husband, the priest, faced a subdeacon. He bowed to touch the floor and then said, "Please forgive me, my brother, for any way I have sinned against you." Greg responded, "I forgive you," and then bowed and asked forgiveness in turn. When my husband gave it, the two embraced, and then each moved on to the next person in line. As the circle advanced, every person had a turn to stand face to face with every other person, asking and giving forgiveness. Joy mingled with tears. A woman I'd quarreled with opened her arms wide and said with a smile, "Come here, this is going to take a while." We do this every year at the beginning of Lent, just as Orthodox Christians do all over the world. But when I described it to a non-Orthodox friend, she wondered how we could give forgiveness without discussion and negotiation. The other person might hurt you again. You might even suspect that their repentance is phony. How can you give forgiveness? By remembering how much God has to forgive you. It's that simple. Forgiveness is never what a person deserves. If we got what we deserved, it wouldn't be forgiveness. When we forgive, we give a costly gift, just as God gives us. And we can't control whether the other person will use that gift well or badly. But we can refuse to go on being chained to their past behavior through bonds of anger and judgment. Anger is an acid that destroys its container. We give forgiveness every year because we need to do that to stay healthy. We ask for forgiveness because we need that even more. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
Country's melting pot? News Odyssey commentator Frederica Mathewes-Green explores that question.
In my dining room, I have a pair of portraits that have been handed down in my family for several generations. Sometimes visitors are awed at these, as if the fact that I have ancestors gives me a special rank. But they have ancestors too. Everybody does. Just because you don't have pictures of them doesn't mean they didn't exist. Each of us has a family tree that goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. But most Americans have no sense of their own family before their grandparents. Citizens of nations older than ours, where dozens of generations have occupied the same patch of ground, have a stronger sense of their roots. Thus, the historic Battle of Kosovo, which took place 600 years ago, is alive today in the hearts of that conflict's descendants. And no matter how this current conflict ends, the new Battle of Kosovo will be remembered with either bitterness or triumphalism for another 600 years. America is famously called a melting pot with little concern for heritage. We celebrate our roots in benign ways. For example, by wearing "Kiss Me, I'm Italian" buttons. And in a few generations, forget that we ever were Italian. We lose a lot in the wake of this amnesia. We lose our history and our sense of roots. But we also lose reasons to kill each other. On the whole, it's a good bargain. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
On the one-month anniversary of the Columbine massacre in Littleton, Colorado, has sparked renewed debate on how to deal with troubled teens. News Odyssey commentator Frederica Mathewes-Green says parental intervention is critical.
Recently, a rumor was circulating through Maryland public schools that the following Monday would be Bring Your Gun to School Day. The scare swept across the internet, and police and school officials found themselves in a bind. If they didn't prepare fully, the result could be disaster. On the other hand, the more attention paid to the rumor, the more it could become a self-fulfilling prophecy. In the end, the day passed peacefully, with only a few false bomb threats. But a third of the students stayed home that day for fear of something worse. Everyone knew someone they could imagine going over the edge. The kind of outsider who flirts with violence and fear. The kind of kid that breaks parents' hearts as they try to find some way to help without driving the child further away. A few years ago, a middle school girl joined a crowd that went in for witchcraft, drugs, and animal torture. Her parents worried that getting strict with her would only drive her further away. Their church's youth pastor thought she was a lost cause. Yet they set some rules, moved her to a Christian school, and restricted her to home, except for church. Miracles can happen. The girl had a profound conversion and turned her life completely around. A couple of years later, in her high school library, a boy in a black trench coat put a gun to her head. He asked, "Do you believe in God?" A friend said later that Cassie Burnell sounded scared but strong as she answered, "Yes." Though their daughter died that day, her parents could be consoled by the radiance of her life. Thanks to their brave parenting, she wasn't one of the kids aiming a weapon that day. If more parents found the courage to intervene, we'd have less cause to fear Bring Your Gun to School Day. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
Television and movies have on young people today. News Odyssey commentator Frederica Mathewes-Green cites one of Hollywood's latest examples of its bad influence on America's youth.
The new R-rated movie, South Park, is about kids trying to sneak into an R-rated movie. Their parents, who object to the foul language their kids learn, are depicted as hysterical prudes. Viewers of South Park walk out with a clear message: censorship is bad. In that case, the things this film depicts must be good. Satan having sex with Saddam Hussein, a mother in a porn film involving excrement, an atheist child calling God a bitch. South Park is ugly and dark, and no healthier for people over 17 than those under. To say it should be avoided is not censorship. After all, movie studios review thousands of scripts every year and reject or censor almost all of them. Paramount made South Park because it was one of the few scripts they really admired. As sad as South Park is, the problem is not mere crudeness. Chaucer's Canterbury Tales are pretty crude, but Chaucer was not setting out to violate his era's standards. His stories are not calculated to shock. Being shocking is South Park's sole point. These days, so little is shocking that South Park has to resort to putting its ugliness in the mouths of children. Do producers expect that kids will sneak into this R-rated movie? And they're banking on it. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
According to a Gallup poll, nearly half the people in this country believe the biblical account of creation. 10% believe the scientific theory of evolution. News Odyssey commentator Frederica Mathewes-Green offers her thoughts.
Recently, the Kansas Board of Education decided that high school students no longer have to master the theory of evolution. Now, I never worried much about Darwin's theory. I figured that if that's the way God wanted to do things, it's his business. But lately, I've been learning that the theory itself has substantial holes. Charles Darwin thought future scientists would be able to fill them, but instead they've gotten larger. Darwin said that all life developed from a single source. The variety of life on Earth, he said, is the result of random genetic mutation. And those creatures with beneficial mutations outbreed the others. Here's 3 quick problems. 1, scientists have never found any fossil evidence of creatures developing from one species into another. 2, they have found fossils of many different species from too early in Earth's history for them to have evolved. And 3, most mutations cause problems, not improvements. For example, to get from crawling creatures to ones that can fly, there'd have to be many generations dragging useless semi-wings. These would be less, not more, likely to thrive. If Darwin's theory is flawed, it should be questioned. We may not yet know what to put in its place, but that's okay. Good science is on a quest to discover what God already knows, and it begins with an open mind. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
Frederica Mathewes-Green.
From my window, I can see an old catalpa tree with a large knothole in the trunk. The other day, I noticed something surprising. Emerging from the hole was the head of a squirrel, sniffing the morning air. I started calculating whether my ladder would reach high enough so I could paint a white lace collar around the hole. And this kind of affection between humans and animals has not always been the norm. After the flood, God informed Noah that the fear of you shall be upon every beast of the earth. Into your hand they are delivered. But what of animals that are neither tools nor appetizers? San Francisco citizens want to change city ordinances to refer to pet guardians, not owners. That term suggests the imperialistic idea of, well, ownership. This is a city where the $7 million animal shelter offers condos with wicker furniture, framed art, and TVs playing nature specials. If animals are the same as us, this kind of treatment makes sense. In some ways, of course, they are the same. We share similar hearts and lungs, sociability, and awareness. But there's a fundamental difference that's hard to express. To paraphrase G.K. Chesterton, if you drove past my house, you could see where a human had painted a lace collar around a squirrel. But you'd have to drive a lot farther before you saw a tree where a squirrel had painted a lace collar around a human. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
Frederica Mathewes-Green says there's nothing to fear.
Not long ago, a friend sent me an email joke that seems appropriate to these millennium days. It goes like this. If the book of Revelation tells us that in the last days the number of the beast will be 666, then what's the number of the highway of the beast? Route 666? Does the beast drive a BMW 666i? Does he have a 666K retirement plan? Is 666 milligrams the minimum daily requirement of beast? And is the beast's next door neighbor 668? The friend who sent me this joke was just a little worried. He said he hoped readers would not think he was trivializing evil. On the contrary, I think one of the healthiest things we can do with our fears is laugh at them. St. Paul says that all the negative spiritual forces that could terrify us are thoroughly defeated in Christ. In his day, all the meat in the butcher shop had been ritually sacrificed to demonic idols. Yet, he said, Christians could eat it without fear because those idols were nothing. I wouldn't call the beast of the apocalypse nothing. He's a powerful and mysterious figure. But the bottom line is, we know who defeated him, so we can afford to laugh. And speaking of what you can afford, did you know his price at Walmart is only $6.56? I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
Frederica Mathewes-Green warns them to be careful what they say and do. The effects on society could be costly.
The election campaign is cranking up, and in coming months, we'll surely hear candidates say things that exasperate or offend us. And people used to say, I may not agree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Not anymore. Now, if you disagree with what a candidate says, go lick the office doorknob. And that's what Dan Savage did. This journalist was suffering from the flu when he heard a candidate on TV say something he didn't like. He decided to go down to the candidate's office, pretend to be a supporter, and do everything he could to pass on his germs. He licked the doorknobs when no one was looking, slobbered on a pen that he handed to the candidate, and coughed on everyone in sight. And this plan was unsuccessful, but not unrewarding. The trendy internet magazine, Salon, proudly ran Dan Savage's story with the title, The Merry Prankster. Politics had something to do with it. The editor also despises this candidate's opinion and admired what he called Savage's passion and fury. The Iowa Attorney General's office called it something else, felony assault. If professional journalists treat bioterrorism as cute, or worse, heroic, what will less stable types do? Civil discussion is passé. Now, if someone disagrees with you, hurt them. Savage has opened a door that any crazy person could walk through. I just advise them not to touch the knob. I'm Frederica Mathewes-Green.
If you have a comment on this or any of this week's stories, leave a message at our